urbaine. Que l'on ouvre les portes, that the doors be open. Comme il est 11h05, conformément à l'ordre adopté 2017, la Chambre...
On Tuesday, February 21st, the House will now move on to private members' business according to the projected order of business.
Consideration of motion M105 concerning amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, standing in the name of Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow, seconded by Mr. Drouin, moves that in light of the death of over 1,000 Canadians each year, including the tragic loss of the Honourable Maurice Bélanger, former MP for Ottawa-Vanier, on August 16, 2016, as a consequence of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, the House, A, reiterate its desire and commitment to, in collaboration with provincial and territorial stakeholders, combat ALS via research and awareness, and B, call upon the government to increase funding for ALS research and to substantially increase national efforts to develop and launch a comprehensive strategy to assist with the eradication of ALS at the earliest opportunity. Debate. The honourable member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To paraphrase the great Lou Gehrig, today I feel like the luckiest person in the world. And I say this because for the first time in my 18-year federal legislative career, I am rising to debate a private member's motion in my own name. It took a long time to get here. And I am excited by the opportunity to use this legislative tool to shine a light on something as important as ALS, often referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease. It is with humility and honor that I rise to launch the debate on Motion 105, and in doing so, it is my hope that all members in this place will stand together and pass M105 without delay. I appreciate that the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell has seconded this motion, and I am hopeful that members in all parties will support M105 as a way of standing with all those suffering with ALS. You see, more than 1,000 Canadians die each year because of ALS, and all are robbed of their freedom while being slowly trapped within their own bodies. Their physical decline is dramatic, and their families can do little but sit back and wait for the end. Certainly those of us in this House have known many with ALS, and we have watched as these brave men and women did battle with a relentless foe. It was less than a year ago that the Honourable Maurice Bélanger, suffering the effects of ALS, presided over this House as an honorary speaker. He had been diagnosed with ALS in the fall of 2015. At what should have been a time of celebration for him and his family, it turned out to be a somber realization that his world was about to change profoundly and that his time was running out. Worse yet, his wife Catherine and their children were forced to sit back and watch as Maurice first lost his voice, then his strength, and eventually his fight against ALS. But Maurice was not alone. Many of us in this place will remember Richard Wackett, Brian Parsons, and even our former clerk, William Corbett. Each of these people contributed so much to this place and to Canada. Yet they were struck down without warning, reason, and without mercy. In the wake of these tragic losses, and hundreds of others, colleagues such as the member for Dufferin-Caledon, the member for Cape Breton-Canso, and even the Prime Minister have all made emotional statements in the House in support of the fight against ALS. I can even confirm that our Prime Minister, the Leader of the Official Opposition, the Leader of the NDP, the MP for Portage-Lisgar, the Treasury Board President, and many more have accepted the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge and took the plunge against ALS. Together, we helped raise more than $19 million for ALS research. A significant accomplishment, but we need to think longer term. Put another way, our parliamentary family has been deeply touched by ALS and members have responded, all members in this House and all parties, by raising awareness and money. M105 is the next step in our fight against ALS. We know that ALS is an unforgiving and brutal disease that gradually paralyzes the body. Someone in otherwise good health will gradually lose the ability to talk, to move, to eat, to swallow, and eventually breathe. Right now, there are approximately 3,000 Canadians living with ALS. And that reason that number is not bigger is because 80% of the people with ALS die within 2 to 5 years of their diagnosis. And as we saw in Muril's case, sometimes it is significantly less than that. But let's talk about Muril for a moment. Muril's journey with ALS was highly visible due to his role as a Member of Parliament, but shines a light on not only what it looks like to have the disease, but also the circle of family members, friends, and colleagues who are affected when someone is diagnosed with ALS. The mobility and communication needs of someone diagnosed with ALS are great and have a tremendous financial burden on everyone involved. It is estimated that ALS has a minimum cost to families of somewhere between $150,000 to $250,000. This does not include the loss of salary that often comes about when a family member leaves their job to care for their loved one full-time, which is usually required. Families faced with an ALS diagnosis must make difficult decisions that attempt to balance the desire for a good quality of life with the cost of achieving that. For example, many people diagnosed with ALS prefer to live at home rather than a care facility. But staying at home frequently requires modifications to accommodate wheelchairs, bathroom aids, lifts, and beds, not to mention the nursing care that is required for someone who is increasingly paralyzed. For families whose loved one has ALS, these decisions have financial and emotional implications that last long after ALS has taken that person's life. Well, there are about 3,000 Canadians living with ALS at any one time. The broader circle of people affected, of course, is much larger. It is fair to say that in each of our ridings, people are dying of ALS and their family members' lives are changed forever because ALS has a lasting financial and emotional impact. ALS kills nearly 1,000 Canadians each year, and a similar number are diagnosed with ALS each year. This creates a revolving door of people who have a disease with no cure and no effective treatment. A disease that limits their remaining days in more ways than one, because not only has their life been significantly shortened, it has also been changed by a host of new needs as their mobility declines and their ability to communicate lessens. Canadians with ALS have said their experience with the disease is like being buried alive or dying in slow motion. It is hard to believe that today, in 2017, that there is still no cure. There are also no effective treatments, and the causes of the disease are unknown. Fewer than 10% of ALS cases are inherited from a family member, meaning that at least 9 out of 10 people diagnosed with ALS develop it seemingly at random. Each one of us in this room has a 1 in 400 chance of being diagnosed with ALS over the course of our lives, which brings me to why research is so important. It is one of the few things that people and families affected by ALS can be hopeful about. Research may not change their own path, but they fervently hope that it will change the path for others who will be diagnosed in the future. Globally, there has been more progress in ALS research in the last 5 years than in the last 100 years. Most leading researchers and clinicians in the field believe we have the tools today to at least understand how ALS is caused. This means there is tremendous potential for the development of effective treatments for the first time ever. But the limitation to developing these treatments, of course, is resources. Resources in the form of research investment. Historically in Canada, ALS research has been funded at approximately $1.5 to $2 million per year through the ALS Society of Canada. There are no other significant Canadian funding mechanisms that are focused exclusively on ALS research. As I have already mentioned, the Ice Buckets Challenge was a huge success, but without an ongoing and sustainable funding mechanism, Canada's ALL research efforts will soon return to traditional funding levels. That means that we are at risk of losing the research momentum at a time when ALS research holds more promise than ever before. So many members participated in that challenge, and in doing so, were part of a tremendous movement that is helping to advance ALS research and provide support and care to people living with the disease. M105, as I said earlier, is the next step. On the day that Morel presided over this House, our Prime Minister Trudeau and the other party leaders all encouraged Canadians to support the organizations that are working to find a cure for ALS. Since then, an all-party ALS caucus has been created to better understand the care and research challenges that ALS presents, as well as opportunities to address them. Today, I'm calling on all members to live up to that promise. The first part of my motion asks that the House continue its commitment to ALS research and awareness, working with stakeholders in our provinces and territories. Besides being the only significant funding mechanism dedicated to ALS research across Canada, the ALS Society of Canada is part of a network of ALS societies with a provincial presence. I support the government's ongoing work with ALS societies across Canada, especially as it strives to maximize our impact towards making ALS a treatable, non-terminable disease. So often things that we debate here in this place are divisive. M105, of course, is not divisive. It is not complex. It does not place one party over another. Imagine the ability for Canadians to be part of a global legacy that could change the meaning of an ALS diagnosis. By investing in ALS research, we could help make that change happen. Families coping with an ALS diagnosis deserve so much more, so much better than the reality that they are currently facing. And as Canadians, we simply cannot afford to lose any momentum for ALS research. I urge every member of this House to give this motion your full support. Your commitment to ALS awareness, research funding, and a comprehensive strategy for the disease will give hope to many people in all our constituencies. We are so very close to treatment breakthroughs for ALS. Help Canada to be a leader in changing the outcome of an ALS diagnosis from terminal to treatable. Thank you all very, very much for your consideration.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't really have a question other than to congratulate the member for an excellent summary of the problem that people that have ALS, as she may know, I have a private member's bill outstanding to make June amyotrophic lateral sclerosis month. And I hope to, if I ever get a chance to do it, I will hope to do that. But she gave an excellent summary of the problems and how we have an obligation to make the public aware of this terrible disease. We saw Muriel and the problems that he had. Actually, I've never seen someone the disease move so fast as it did with him. Normally it takes, on the average, it takes about four years, but his, it seemed to just come out of nowhere. But thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to congratulate the member for her excellent speech.
The honourable member for Humber River Blackfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to say to my member, if I can be of any help somehow getting your motion moved up or your bill moved up, it would be wonderful through the Speaker that I need to mention that. And again, through the Speaker, anything we could do to designate June as the ALS month to, again, try to bring awareness. And that's what it's about. $19 million from the Ice Bucket Challenge went a long way in helping the research in partnership with so many other places. Israel and the U.S. are making significant strides in this, but it needs more money, more help, and more leadership. And I want to thank my honourable colleague for his comments.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to congratulate my honourable colleague on both, I think, a very important motion and on a passionate and well-thought-out speech. My question is going to focus, though, on action that we can take. In the 2017 pre-budget submission, the ALS Society of Canada made some specific recommendations to this government for the 2017 budget, which will be coming up in a matter of weeks. They asked that the federal government invest $25 million over 5 years to maintain the momentum built through the Ice Bucket Challenge and partnership with Brain Canada and the Canada Brain Research Fund, and they asked the federal government to invest $10 million to allow every Canadian currently living with ALS, it's about 3,000 Canadians, and every stored sample from those who have passed an opportunity to contribute their sample to Project Mini, which is an independent large-scale genome research project, hopefully to find the genetic mutations linked to ALS and identify possible treatments. Can my honourable colleague tell me, is she confident that her Liberal government will actually make these recommendations and will see those commitments in this budget coming up so that we can back up these words with action?
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
To thank my colleague for his comments and his commitment to issues like this that I know he cares very much about. And may I say that there's been more progress done in the last 5 years than in the last 100 years. And that has come as a result of exactly what we've done in this House with raising the awareness, the things like the Ice Bucket Challenge, our personal support and donations in our ridings to the ALS societies, and the continued focus on trying to find a cure for this. And I'm confident that as we continue to move forward in working on this together, these are important issues that have affected some of us specifically. Muriel was my seatmate and my colleague for many years. The disease attacked him, as my previous colleague said, with just devastating timelines. And we've seen him in the House deteriorate to an enormous degree very, very quickly, and I doubt that any of us would ever forget that. And so I would hope that all of us will keep that in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I did want to start off my comments today by thanking the member from Humber Valley Black Creek for bringing this issue forward, but also my colleague from Dufferin-Caledon for raising awareness. Madam Speaker, this is a devastating disease affecting approximately 2,500 to 3,000 Canadians over the age of 18 that are currently living with ALS and over 200,000 individuals worldwide. These individuals experience a loss of mobility, a decline in breathing, difficulty eating and drinking, and slurred speech, or sometimes, Madam Speaker, even the complete loss of speech. While some suffering with this incurable disease may live longer than others, ALS is usually fatal within 2 to 5 years after diagnosis. Madam Speaker, there's still so much work to be done and research to be done to help reverse this disease, and ultimately what we would all like to see is find a cure. And I think I speak for most people when I say that the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge in 2014 played a massive role in raising awareness about the disease. I know, Madam Speaker, myself as a professional, I'm a chiropractor, and my first experience with ALS was early in the 1990s. A friend of mine who I served with, in the St. Mary's Knights of Columbus, we had shared our Irish background, so we had some good fellowship over the years, but he married late in life and had a young family and his wife. And when I heard about him getting diagnosed with ALS, it really brought it home, because I could see, something that you hear about is Lou Gehrig disease, but to see it firsthand and see it personally, how fast and how real and how devastating this condition is, and the real effect on family and community really brings it home. The public awareness, the Ice Bucket Challenge campaign went viral on social media with celebrities, athletes, politicians, and all our friends and neighbors taking part. And I bring this up because prior to the 2014 ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, the awareness of ALS really was quite limited. Those who did know about the disease referred to it as Lou Gehrig's disease after the famous New York Yankees player who came up publicly with his battle in 1939. The importance of raising awareness through social media proves effective because following the Ice Bucket Challenge, the ALS Association raised an additional $100 million, and the ALS Society of Canada raised an additional $26 million. And this additional research funding led to some extremely valuable research. And as my colleague said, the last 5 years, it's been really accelerated. Recently, a third gene has been identified as a cause for the disease, which goes to show that raising public awareness and ensuring funding is available to researchers, progress can be made to find a cure. In 2013, Project Mini was initiated by 2 ALS patients. Madam Speaker, it's a research project which aims to map out the full DNA profiles of approximately 15,000 individuals with ALS and 7,500 control subjects with the hopes of identifying genes that are associated with ALS and ultimately lead to developing treatment. This large-scale genetic research is unprecedented and will require both public awareness and, of course, important funding. On January 20th, 2017, Canada became the 17th country to join this research project. The ALS Society of Canada is leading fundraising efforts and seeking to sequence up to 1,000 genomes, with 4 of Canada's leading ALS geneticists coming together in their first ever cross-country collaboration. 4 other Canadian ALS clinics have also come together to collect and store blood samples being used for research, including the GF Strong Rehabilitation Center's ALS Center in Vancouver, the Sunnybrook Health and Sciences Center ALS Clinic in Toronto, the ALS program at the Montreal Neurological Institute and Hospital, and the ALS Clinic at the CHU de Quebec. As of today, Madam Speaker, 7% of Canada's goal has been reached. With 62 DNA profiles are good for months, while 62 DNA profiles are good for a month's work, it is vital that this important research initiative be discussed publicly so that more people, especially Canadians, can participate or donate. As for the status of the project as a whole, Madam Speaker, 7,963 DNA profiles have been collected so far, with the goal of collecting 22,500 DNA profiles. Madam Speaker, there's still a lot of work to be done, but as we can all see, countries around the world are coming together to find a cure. Madam Speaker, I am happy to support M105. I believe that we should be using our resources to help advance research for diseases such as ALS. Madam Speaker, our Conservative Party has always been a strong advocate for neurological research, and we've always supported the need for more ALS research. In 2011, Brain Canada was created, with the previous Conservative government investing $100 million over 7 years. This includes $10 million to the ALS Society of Canada through Brain Canada to stimulate research relevant to ALS. Madam Speaker, I was so happy to see the Minister of Finance invest up to $20 million in additional matching funds to Brain Canada in Budget 2016, and I hope that it will continue to be a national non-profit organization that the government invests in. Madam Speaker, we as parliamentarians saw how rapidly this disease can progress. Our colleague, the late member from Ottawa Vanier, was diagnosed with ALS in November 2015. We saw his courage. We saw him try to persevere and remain in the House of Commons as much as he could and representing his constituents. We saw him live out a day as the Speaker of the House, a moment, Madam Speaker, I think that brought us all closer. Madam Speaker, we saw this awful disease rapidly take over his body and his speech. I don't think there's a member in the House who would not agree that action needs to be taken to ensure that a cure for ALS is found. Madam Speaker, there is hope. Living with ALS should not be the end. We know progress has been made and is still being made every single day. 400,000 people around the world are affected by the disease, and with more than 100,000 dying every single year. 100,000, Madam Speaker, died every single year. We need to understand that while millions have been raised for ALS, portions of these funds are allocated to help patients and their families who typically spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to care for a loved one. And this is a struggle for most families, Madam Speaker. ALS Canada's provincial chapters use portion of donations to help these families access care in their community and provide specialized equipment to ALS patients. We must all remember, Madam Speaker, that ALS does not just affect the individuals, but it affects the families and the friends as well. There's nothing worse than watching a person you love and care about progressively get weaker, lose their speech, and eventually become immobilized. Unfortunately, unlike many other diseases, Madam Speaker, there is no survivorship. There are currently no anniversaries to celebrate the day that an individual beats ALS. As Dr. Lauren Zinman, a neurologist who is at the head of the ALS clinic at Sunnybrook Health Science Centre in Toronto, stated, there are so many smart people working on this disease now, and it has the necessary attention. And all the community is really excited about a breakthrough in the hopefully not too distant future. The day for a cure is not an impossible expectation, Madam Speaker. We've seen breakthroughs with HIV/AIDS, cancer, and many other once fatal diseases. These diseases have become manageable thanks to research and commitment and government investment. And I believe that researchers are on the right path, Madam Speaker. And if we, as a country, continue to support projects like such as Project Mini and continue to support our researchers, I believe, Madam Speaker, ALS will be a disease of the past. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, the reprise de débat, the honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am proud to rise today as health critic for the New Democrat and on behalf of all my New Democrat colleagues to stand in support of motion M105 and to speak to the importance of addressing amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS. I also want to again express my congratulations and thanks to the member from Humber River Black Creek for her support in this area and hard work in bringing this important issue before this House. ALS has devastating effects on the many individuals it affects directly, on their families and caregivers, and on our entire public health care system. It is a disease that doesn't discriminate. In its most common form, it arrives unexpectedly and can affect anyone, regardless of ethnicity, gender, or age. Its impacts are keenly felt by all Canadian communities, including our very own here on Parliament Hill. All of us remember our colleague Maurice Bélanger's courageous public struggle with ALS. Mr. Bélanger was diagnosed with ALS following the 2015 federal election, and it was especially difficult to know that at the very moment that he hoped to live out his dream of being elected Speaker of this chamber, he was struggling to find his voice. He sent a note to his colleagues announcing he had been diagnosed in the fall of 2015, and he passed away this last August. This shows how sudden and rapid the pathology of this disease can be. But Mr. Bélanger did not go quickly in terms of the impact he made, and nor was he silenced. Mr. Bélanger was the first MP to use a voice generator on the job. He took advantage of the tool in January 2016 to introduce a private member's bill to make the English lyrics to O Canada gender neutral. He also used the computerized voice from his iPad in March 2016 to carry his remarks when he served as honorary Speaker of this House. By that time, Mr. Bélanger needed assistance to walk. He thanked his colleagues for the great privilege before he was helped out of the Speaker's chair. My colleague, the member from Outremont, called this a rare moment of grace in our parliamentary institutions. Let us seize this moment to commemorate Mr. Bélanger's passionate voice and to work together towards finding a cure for this deadly disease. Let us honour our colleague and ensure that all Canadians have access to high-quality and compassionate and effective care. This motion calls on the House to reiterate its commitment to combat ALS, to increase funding for medical research and awareness campaigns, and to develop a comprehensive national strategy to assist with the eradication of this disease. Now, New Democrats support this motion. We have a long, proud tradition of advocating for federal leadership on healthcare issues. Indeed, among our party's foundational pillars stands a commitment to expanding healthcare and ensuring that all Canadians have access to the treatments and medicines they need when they need them. no matter where they live, no matter their economic circumstance, and no matter their background. Now, ALS is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that destroys nerve cells that control muscles, leading to disability. The living wires which connect the brain to the patient's muscles degenerate, leading to a loss of mobility, speech, and to the gradual paralysis of the muscles of the throat and diaphragm as the patient loses the ability to swallow, cough, and breathe. It is a terminal illness. It does not have a cure nor an effective treatment. Currently, approximately 3,000 Canadians are living with ALS. Every year, 1,000 will succumb to the disease and 1,000 will be newly diagnosed. The lifespan after diagnosis is on average 2 to 5 years. ALS is inherited in 5 to 10% of cases. In most people with familial ALS, their children have a 50-50 chance of developing the disease. In its most common form, there is no known cause. ALS can affect anyone, with many people being struck down by the disease in the primes of their lives. However, the risk increases as individuals grow older. So as Canada's population ages, Madam Speaker, it is becoming increasingly more important that we prepare our healthcare system and our communities for the inevitable rise in the number of Canadians suffering from ALS and other age-related illnesses. Now, some of the early signs and symptoms of ALS include difficulty walking or doing normal activities, weakness in leg, feet, ankles, and hands, trouble swallowing and eating, muscle cramps and twitching in arms, shoulders, and tongue. Most people with ALS will also develop trouble speaking over time. This usually starts as occasional mild slurring of words, but progresses to become more severe. Speech eventually becomes more difficult for others to understand, and people with ALS must rely on other communication technologies to communicate. For many with the disease, losing their voice is closely connected with loss of autonomy and self-identity. Most of us will recall the 2014 Ice Bucket Challenge, co-funded by Pete Freites, in part to raise awareness of these impacts. Through broad public initiatives such as that, Canadians came together in an unprecedented way to support ALS research and care, resulting in $17 million being raised. $11.5 million of those funds were dedicated to research and then matched with $10 million by Brain Canada, a conduit of the federal government's Canada Brain Research Fund. Now, due to a Canada Brain Research Fund allocation deadline of March 2017, the funds from the current ALS Canada partnership will be fully invested by 2016, and the momentum that we have created will become difficult to maintain. Continuing these programs is critical to creating a world where ALS is a treatable disease, perhaps even prevented. The programs currently operating in this partnership with Brain Canada consist of Hudson grants, Discovery grants, and Career Transition Awards. Now, in its submission to the 2017 pre-budget consultations, the ALS Society of Canada recommended to this government some concrete action they'd like to see taken. First, they would ask that the federal government invest $25 million over 5 years, that's $5 million per year, to maintain the momentum built through the Ice Bucket Challenge and partnership with Brain Canada and the Canada Brain Research Fund. Second, they have asked this federal government to invest $10 million to allow every Canadian living with ALS and every stored sample from those who have passed an opportunity to contribute that sample to Project Mini, an independent large-scale whole genome research project. A prominent Canadian-backed initiative, Project Mini plans to map the complete DNA profiles of 15,000 people with ALS, along with 7,500 people who don't have ALS, being a control group, to create a database of genetic information on the disease. They will then compare that data from the ALS participants and the non-ALS participants and hopefully find the genetic mutations linked to ALS. Once they find those, hopefully we can find possible treatments. Now, the Canadian component of Project Mini brings together 4 of Canada's leading ALS geneticists in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City for their first ever cross-country collaboration. Each has led or been part of international consortia that have resulted in some of the most important genetic discoveries in the field. They also represent a geographical balance that provides a collaborative set of Canadian samples representative of ALS cases across the country. That's Dr. Nicholas Dupré, Dr. Ian McKenzie, Dr. Ekaterina Regeva and Dr. Guy Rouleau are leading this research. Now, other collaborators in Canada's Project Mini effort are the ALS clinics, who will collect and in some cases store the blood samples being used for the initiative. Potential ALS clinic partners that have been identified to date are the GF Strong Rehabilitation Centre's ALS Centre in Vancouver, the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre ALS Clinic in Toronto, the ALS program at the Montreal Neurological Institute and Hospital, and the ALS clinic at the CHU de Quebec. In essence, ALS research has come further in the last 5 to 7 years than in the previous century, and researchers are hopeful for a continued acceleration of knowledge leading to an effective treatment. As of 2017, most of the leading researchers and clinicians in the field believe they now have the tools required to understand how ALS is caused, which will ultimately lead to treatments for this fatal disease. They're waiting for this Liberal government to help them by committing those funds in this budget. We have to do more. Just as Mr. Bélanger's work in this Parliament continues to this day, we must commit ourselves to working together to find a cure for this deadly disease. Finally, Madam Speaker, to those who have lost a loved one to ALS, we grieve with you, and we remain steadfast in our commitment to ending ALS. To those supporting a loved one living with ALS, we pledge to support you. And to those living with ALS, we are with you. We will not give up until we find an effective treatment and make ALS a disease of the past. New Democrats will do everything we can to make these three objectives a reality. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Glengarry Prescott Russell.
Madame la Présidente, je suis fier de...
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to rise in the House this morning to talk about the motion brought forward by my colleague, the member for Humble River Black Creek. This motion seeks to shed light on this terrible disease, ALS. Every one of us in this House has witnessed what this disease can do to human beings because we saw what happened to our honourable colleague, Maurice Bélanger. I will always remember the meetings that we had during the campaign at Maurice's house on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Maurice would always take the time to feed us because he knew that we had had long days knocking on doors. For those who knew him, Maurice always said exactly what he thought. At the beginning of these meetings, Maurice would be the way he always was. He would express himself strongly, although at the end he spoke less. His voice was not as strong as it had been before. I thought, well, you know, a long campaign has an effect on people, even seasoned veterans. Later, I saw him at an event, and he'd completely lost his voice. I thought, well, he must be losing his voice because he was speaking so loudly every day during the campaign. But this was just my way of rationalizing the situation and thinking that Maurice didn't have a serious disease. But we know what happened. I witnessed what ALS can do to people.
Maurice had the courage to share his journey with all of us in this chamber. I did not know much about this disease, except that Professor Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with ALS and somehow managed to survive. Sadly, this was the only exposure to ALS I've had much of my life. And then a few years back, the Ice Bucket Challenge happened. We participated, gave money, and then the ALS issue faded. Madam Speaker, we have an all-party ALS caucus, which I proudly chair. I was interested in this issue because I witnessed what happened to our friend and thought I needed to make a difference. I was even more determined when ALS Society of Canada informed me that their community is always 3,000 individuals diagnosed with ALS. Nearly 1,000 die each year in Canada. This fact makes it hard for ALS Society of Canada to raise funds and cultivate champions within their community, as they will most likely die of the disease within 2 to 5 years. Unlike cancer, there are no survivors. And speaking of champions, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Carol Skinner, who was at our first ALS meeting. I want to thank her for sharing her story with us and for not giving up. I also want to acknowledge her husband and the 2,999 other families out there who are supporting their loved ones, because we know that 80% of the burden of care is shouldered by a family member. The cost on families can range from $150,000 to $250,000, and that's not counting the loss of revenues should the diagnosis result in a loss of employment. We also know that 80% of those diagnosed with ALS will die within 2 to 5 years. I now know that Stephen Hawking is part of the lucky 10% who get to survive 10 years or longer. We also know that only 10% of those diagnosed with ALS is attributed to family genes. But sadly, Madam Speaker, that's all we know for the cause of ALS. Doctors can determine the cause of ALS for only 5 to 10% of patients. The rest, we do not know, for now. Madam Speaker, research is the most significant lever that we have to give a chance for those who are diagnosed with ALS to survive. That is why I support the motion. Research is the only way to increase the likelihood of finding a cure and increasing survival rates. We know this is true. For example, cancer survival rates for all cancers went up from 53 to 60% in approximately 15 years. And that's not factoring all the progress that's been made over the past century. And that's all because of research. Furthermore, the leading experts and clinicians believe they have the tools required to effectively understand how ALS is caused because of the research done in the past 5 years. That is more research combined in the last 100 years. But more needs to be done. For example, Project Mind, which aims to profile 15,000 individuals with ALS and 7,500 control subjects worldwide, will provide targets to researchers. Essentially, it will allow researchers to adapt a ready, aim, fire strategy as opposed to a ready, fire strategy. If we don't know the cause, it's extremely hard to identify the cure or provide targeted medicine. Most ALS researchers believe the limitation to developing treatments is resources in the form of research investments. Of the 30-plus genes known to play a role in the development of ALS, very few have been examined in detail by more than one research facility in the world. Leading experts in ALS research know there are multiple genetic factors that contribute to people developing ALS, and it is often a combination of these factors that leads to the diagnosis. They also know that it is possible for the genetic mutations to show up in healthy individuals, but they never lead to developing ALS. It is for this reason that Project Mind will look into the genetic profiles of 15,000 ALS patients worldwide. This will allow to get a better understanding of the genetic difference and mutations that have a strong causal effect on individuals developing ALS, therefore increasing the chance of identifying the specific cause and eventually a cure. I want to applaud the ALS Society of Canada for taking part in this study. It is a global effort, and I am glad to see Canada will be participating. Our diversity in Canada will provide better sampling in this global initiative. The project in Canada is currently funded at 36%. All the funding comes from grassroots fundraising campaigns. I hope governments will come to the table to at least bring the total project cost to 50%. This would greatly accelerate Canada's participation. The project worldwide was officially launched in 2013. It is up to us to decide how quickly we will get this done in Canada. Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to elaborate on this subject that members of Parliament have been lobbying on for quite some time now in regards to ALS, and that is the right to try legislation. I actually want to thank the Member of Parliament for Humber River Black Creek for not including this in her motion, as this would have caused me to rethink my support. I agree with the objectives in the proposed bill that we've seen. Essentially, we need to find a better way to get pharmaceutical research to market in order to ensure that patients can benefit from it. But, Madam Speaker, the no liability clause in the proposed bill, which would effectively remove all responsibility from the sponsor of the drug, is certainly not the proper way to move forward on this. The sponsor must continue to bear responsibility. There is a better path forward, and that path involves more dollars for research, and that is the reason why I support this motion. I know it can be easy for me to say, as I don't face a terminal illness. In fact, if I were in that position, I would try every avenue to find a cure. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that many terminal ill patients have been taken advantage of in the past. In many cases, it killed them before their time or caused them even more illness. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, some of the false hopes that are given to certain communities because of this so-called miracle treatment are despicable. We only have to think of the recent example with those diagnosed with MS and the CCSVI treatment. Having said this, Madam Speaker, I want to applaud the work Jeff Perot of Adaptive Canuck ALS Foundation has done and his determination to advocate for the rest of his life for what he believes is right. He is, in my mind, a great advocate for those who have been diagnosed with ALS. I do recognize that we need to find a better way to access innovative medicine wherever it may become available in the world. We just need to ensure the patient is always front and center in these decisions. Madam Speaker, we are close to finding a positive path for those who are diagnosed with ALS. For this to happen, we need to continue to advocate for more research investment dollars, raise awareness, and provide a leadership role in Canada. We need a coordinated approach in Canada that rewards horizontal information sharing. Once again, I want to thank my honourable colleague for bringing this important motion forward. This is our Ice Bucket Challenge, and I encourage and challenge all members of this House to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very pleased to rise in support of the member from Humber River Black Creek's motion M105, which calls on this House to not only reiterate support for ALS research and awareness, but also calls on the government to increase funding for ALS research and develop a national strategy for the eradication of ALS. We all know someone who has been struck by this disease. Right in the House, of course, we watched ALS take one of our own, the Honourable Muriel Belanger, just last year. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take time in this debate to send our thoughts and prayers to Mr. Belanger's family and to our colleagues across the way. I still look back at Mr. Belanger's day as Speaker as one of the more memorable moments I've spent in this House. The cheers from all sides of the House and, of course, the pride Mr. Belanger displayed as he took his place in the Speaker's chair. A dear friend of mine lost her father to ALS years back. He was a Justice of the Peace in Edmonton and served his community without fail in that role. Despite running across a rogues gallery of Edmontonians appearing before him for bail hearings every day, he never had a bad word to say about his service to the city. In the early 90s, when I left Edmonton to hunt for work, he helped take care of my home in my absence, mowing the lawn and helping take care of my dog without any expectation of a return favor. After the disease had taken its toll and he knew it was his time, his final request was simply to be brought back to his home to pass surrounded by his family. Debilitating diseases like ALS affect our communities in various ways. Healthcare is always a hot-button issue, particularly health transfers, as we know that it's been in the forefront of political discussion in the last few months. From accessibility to community support to program funding and resources, we hear from people at all levels. I know my office, no doubt like many other MPs here, work with constituents that need access to caregiving and are seeking help to find regional resources. And as is often the case, are looking for more support from a system that may not be best equipped to handle changing demographics and demand. Discussions like the one we're having today are essential for establishing an action plan for community organizations that serve those living with debilitating conditions. Approximately 3,000 Canadians live with ALS, a disease with no known cause, no genetic predispositions, and upon diagnosis gives a sufferer an average life expectancy of just 2 to 5 years. ALS can hit anyone at any time in their life. While the average onset is 40 to 60 years, there are people under the age of 20 being diagnosed. It's important that we make sure organizations serving the communities we represent have the best information, the right experts, and the appropriate tools to help the people that rely on them for their help. Despite knowing what we do about the disease, there's still much to learn. There's no way to detect the disease early, no treatment to delay the development of the disease, and no new drugs emerge. While new drugs emerge constantly, there's no new cure. Further research into neurological disorders, brain injuries, and general brain sciences may open new doors on how we approach ALS treatment and maybe even detection. A report done a few years ago out of Boston University noted a potential connection between brain injury and ALS. It was found that some former athletes all shared an abnormal protein in their brains and spinal cords, all had a history of repeated brain trauma, and several had been diagnosed with ALS before their death. When I read of this study, I couldn't help but to think of a friend and former work colleague of mine who we lost to ALS. He had played college football at Brigham Young University with future NFL star Steve Young as his teammate. My friend was always quick to point out that he was a third stringer and that Steve Young was too busy with the attention of fans and young women that comes with being a starting quarterback to even talk to my friend. Upon diagnosis, my colleague decided to live out his years to the fullest. He remarried, attended several, and I note several Super Bowls, and traveled the world to golf. He never let his condition change him or get him down, and making sure his golfing buddies still razzed him when he made a bad swing or fell over in a sand trap. I'm always left to wonder if his years of college football played a part in the disease that took him. More research in these areas may help us determine what lifestyle factors, if any, contribute to a higher risk of developing this disease. In 2013, our previous government launched funding for concussion and brain injury research. It's a good start. It's my hope that the current government continues on this path for the sake of our kids, our friends, even my friends across the aisle who are still playing contact sports. This kind of research also helps organizations like the ALS Society of Canada to determine what areas they need to focus on for the people that look out or to look to them for help. For parents, spouses, family members who are living with and are supporting someone with ALS, it can be a struggle to find the resources and community support they need to help their loved one. Caregivers can be struck with various challenges when caring for someone who needs full-time support. These challenges include stress, social withdrawal, depression, high blood pressure, sleep deprivation, as well as financial strain and job insecurity. Caregivers are expected to power through some of the most emotionally and physically exhausting situations, all while making sure they're giving a high standard of care to the person they love. ALS comes with many challenges. One being that family caregivers are often young themselves, forcing them to take a leave of absence or quit their jobs to care for a loved one. Without the appropriate resources, or at least without knowing where to get those resources, the financial burden on a family caregiver can rapidly increase. The ALS Society of Alberta notes that a person with ALS can require equipment and care valued at more than $240,000. For someone who is overwhelmed with these new care responsibilities, the new financial realities for health equipment and nursing, and the question of how they'll be able to pay day-to-day expenses like rent, mortgages, and bills can be devastating. It can be argued that these issues are the jurisdiction of the provincial health policy, but we still have a duty to help our constituents when they come to our office looking for help. To bring these concerns forward and hopefully develop evidence-based policies as a response to the needs of the people we hear from. Private members' business is an essential part of our parliamentary process, which is why historically votes on matters like this motion before us today are free votes left to the discretion of the individual member, regardless of political stripe. It's here within this legislative and procedural framework that we can seek and find support for issues like this on a nonpartisan and supportive manner. It allows for cooperation, lets us as individual members branch off beyond our respective parties' interests and serve the interests of the people who elected us. We have numerous motions like M105 that are before us in the House right now. One motion in particular from the member for Niagara Falls, who is working in partnership with the member for Don Valley West, calls for developing a national Alzheimer's and dementia strategy. We had one introduced from the member for Edmonton Manning that unfortunately didn't pass for what I can only imagine were political reasons, given the bill would have helped thousands, if not millions, of Canadians, present and future, in accessing safe and efficient organ donation. The member for Edmonton Manning has himself saved a life by donating an organ, so he knows what a national donor registry could have meant for those in need. He had the support of many national organizations, but his worthy bill was voted down in a whipped vote. Just last week, the government voted down a private member's bill put forward from a member from the NDP. The bill would have allowed small business owners passing down the business to family and be treated the same tax-wise as if you sold to a complete stranger. A worthy bill that would support small families and small farms and businesses that had the support of the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc, yet was voted down. I hope members on the government side will take note of the support given by members of both the Conservative and the NDP opposition to Motion 105 and other worthy private members' business, and in the future vote for what is right and not for what is just politically expedient. I know constituents in my riding agree with enhancing research and awareness for ALS and other debilitating conditions. They expect a challenge, perhaps one of the first viral fundraiser campaigns of its kind, raise enough money to fund numerous ALS studies. One of those studies managed to uncover a gene present in both inherited and sporadic forms of ALS. This is one example of how community-based campaigns can fund and drive research. If the ISPEC challenge is any indication, we have hundreds and thousands of Canadians that are ready to get involved and help eradicate ALS. I want to thank the member from Humber River Black Creek for introducing this motion, and I know most of all if not all members of the House can get behind it. Hopefully during this session we can strive to achieve the same level of respect and understanding from each other on this government member's motion as we do for other members, private members' business moving forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And first off, let me just applaud my colleague from HumberVu Black Creek. I know I'm still learning the names. Humber River Black Creek, who has done a phenomenal job, not only on issues such as this, but many others. I often reflect on some of the efforts that she's put in terms of our seniors in Canada. And I think that she approaches, and I believe that she approaches the issue with very much a caring heart. And once again, we have a motion before us dealing with ALS, such a brutal disease, Madam Speaker, that it affects in such a dramatic way many Canadians in all regions of our country. And I just acknowledge the fact that once again she has her heart in the right place as we try to move forward, yet on dealing with another very important issue to Canadians. You know, we're wearing these blue flowers today. I believe they're the corn flowers, Madam Speaker, as a symbol of support. We need to recognize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people in our communities that are directly or indirectly affected. As is pointed out from speakers, that we all know some individuals that have been impacted after being diagnosed with ALS. One of the most visible one for us very recently was the former late Maurice Belanger, a man that, after the last federal election, in my discussions with him, he had talked about running for the position of Speaker of this chamber, and how quickly things deteriorated, Madam Speaker. I was absolutely shocked, as all of us were virtually inside this chamber, and the previous speaker made reference to the fact of the late Morrell sitting in that chair as an honorary speaker for the day and the impact that had, or the private members bill. It is a sad story, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, there are too many sad stories. The good news is, I believe, is that we have a community and a support system, different organizations, stakeholders that are there to support individuals that have been diagnosed with it and their families, Madam Speaker. We all recognize the challenges in healthcare today. What role should Ottawa play, the national government play, in dealing with this? I've often taken the approach, when I used to be the healthcare critic actually in the province of Manitoba, that we need to do more in terms of spending on research. There are many different diseases and disorders that are out there that government needs to be more proactive at looking at ways in which we can have a very tangible impact, save lives, be there for families. And that's one of the reasons why, in many ways, we are as supportive as we are in terms of not only acknowledging, but in certain areas provide funding for organizations that are there for the long term, to try to look for those cures, try to support research and studies and so forth, Madam Speaker. At the end of the day, I look at it as something that, as national government, we can provide national leadership. It's important that we recognize who does what in our healthcare system. We have, as I say, those great organizations that have led the fight in many ways, especially on the areas of research, public awareness, and so forth. We have provincial governments, the administrators of healthcare, and I would suggest you, through the national government, we need national leadership to ensure that what's happening in one province is being spread out. The good things that what takes place in one region of the country is being shared in all regions of the country. To look at ways in which we can have a more tangible impact, Madam Speaker, that is something in which I believe this government, and in fact, all members want to see is a national government that has a perspective that's going to look at this from that national perspective, looking at the different stakeholders, including provinces and others. I see you're standing up, Madam Speaker. I trust I'll have another opportunity to be able to continue.
The honourable member will have 5.5 minutes to complete his speech the next time that this issue is before the House.